MSI have finally made a thin and light gaming laptop that I can recommend. But hold on, no laptop is perfect. So let's find out how their new Stealth 16 compares against competitors like ASUS's Zephyrus G16 in this review. The Stealth is available in MSI's charcoal black finish, which is a sort of silver grey. The all-aluminum chassis feels nice and premium, but there is a little flex if you're pushing down on it. All edges are rounded and smooth, and it does a decent job of hiding fingerprints, which are easy to clean with a microfiber cloth. It's easy to open without the front lifting up, and the hinge feels smooth and sturdy. The hinge has a center support, so it's not just the far edges taking all the pressure, but there's a bit more wobble to the screen than I'd like. If you bump it, it just shakes around for ages. The Stealth isn't a thick laptop. It feels great to carry around. It's on the thinner side for a 16-inch gaming laptop, but not quite as thin compared to what I consider to be its competitors: Lenovo's Legion 7i and ASUS's Zephyrus G16. The laptop by itself weighs in at 4.4 pounds or 2 kilos, increasing to about 6 pounds or 2.8 kilos with a 240-watt charger included, and there's basically no difference in weight between the 5070 and 5080 versions. It's only slightly heavier compared to the Zephyrus G16 and Legion 7i, but ultimately it's still a very portable 16-inch machine, and it's a similar deal with the chargers included. They're all on the lighter side as far as 16-inch gaming laptops go. I've tested two configurations of Stealth 16. Both have Intel's latest Panther Lake processor, 32 gigs of RAM, and a 16-inch OLED screen. The only difference is one has RTX 5080 graphics, while the other has the 5070. But there are many other options, and if any of them have a good sale, we'll list them on the GamingLaptop.deal's website so you can save money. The keyboard has 4 zones of RGB backlighting, so more customization compared to ASUS's more expensive Zephyrus G16. Key brightness can be adjusted between 3 levels or turned off with the F8 shortcut, and all keys and secondary functions get lit up. You can control and customize the lighting through the included MSI Center software, which is the control panel for the laptop. MSI are using their own Mystic Light software now, rather than the SteelSeries software they used previously, and I found MSI's new way of managing lighting much simpler and easier to configure. The keyboard feels nice to type on, but the screen can wobble a bit depending on how angry you are when you respond to emails. The only thing I didn't like were the small up and down arrow keys. The power button is part of the keyboard and right next to delete and backspace, but an accidental press didn't do anything. The power button is also a fingerprint scanner, which works quickly and accurately. MSI says the touchpad is 54% larger this gen, and it's huge. Possibly too big, because when scrolling one-handed, my palm would often trigger a physical click. Most of the time, the palm rejection catches this and nothing happens, but it still feels weird when it clicks, and it was annoying in the few times where incorrect clicks were triggered. Port selection is better than last gen. The biggest problem with last year's model was the power cable was on the right and in the middle, so it got in the way of your mouse hand. Well, it's on the left now and pushed back a little, but there's clearly still room for all ports to go back more. 2.5 gigabit Ethernet was surprising from a thinner design like this, but there's no Thunderbolt 5 or SD card slot. Both Type-C ports only offer DisplayPort support with Optimus on via the Intel integrated graphics, so VR over Type-C is a no-go here, but you can use HDMI to connect directly to the NVIDIA GPU. Getting inside requires unscrewing 7 Phillips head screws, all the same length. It was a little tough to open. I wouldn't have been able to do it without the these pry tools. I'll leave a link to them below the video. Once inside, we've got the battery down the front, 2 RAM slots just above in the middle, 2 PCIe Gen 4 M.2 storage slots to the left, and the Wi-Fi 7 card on the right. Unlike other thinner competitors like Razer's Blade or ASUS's Zephyrus, MSI Stealth actually has upgradable RAM, and while mine came with DDR5 5600 sticks, MSI says it supports up to DDR5 7200. The upgrade score is solid for a 16-inch gaming laptop, and yeah, higher than the Blade and Zephyrus because of the upgradable memory. I also confirmed both M.2 storage slots can fit drives with chips on both sides, no problem. Speeds from the installed 1TB PCIe Gen 4 SSD were great, and Wi-Fi performance is decent, just not as good compared to the majority of Wi-Fi 7 laptops we've tested. There are front-facing speakers on either side of the keyboard, and subwoofers underneath towards the front on the left and right sides. MSI have done it. They finally have good-sounding speakers. They're not quite as good as ASUS's Zephyrus series, but they're clear with decent bass and only minor wrist rest vibration at higher volume. The Stealth is powered by a 4-cell 90Wh battery, slightly smaller compared to the 99Wh battery found in last year's version. Display Power Saver is enabled by default, which automatically lowers the screen's refresh rate to 60Hz when you unplug the charger to save power. This is why the screen flashes black, and it goes back to 240Hz when you plug back in. Battery life was great thanks to Intel's new 386H Panther Lake processor, lasting for 11 hours in our YouTube video playback test, though ASUS's laptops with the same chip inside were able to last longer. It lost 17% of its battery charge while asleep for 24 hours. But this isn't a fair comparison with the other laptops, as it depends on the size of the laptop's battery. Here's how much power was lost on average per hour, which is a fair comparison. It's not a bad result, but the laptops that I'd say are competitors like the Legion 7i and Zephyrus G16 both used less power while asleep. Let's check out thermals next. The CPU and GPU are covered by a standard 2-fan cooler with a couple of heat pipes shared between them and a phase change thermal compound. Air comes in through these holes on the bottom panel and gets exhausted out of these vents above the keyboard and out of the back. So no hot air blowing on your mouse hand, which is a change from last gen. I only noticed a small cooler difference between the 5070 and 5080 versions. The 5080 has this heat pipe on the opposite side, and the left side of the cooler is slightly bigger. The MSI Center software lets us change between different performance modes, which from lowest to highest are silent, balanced, and extreme performance. Extreme has a new Apex option, which basically attempts to max out performance at the expense of more fan noise. Extreme mode lets you overclock the GPU, and by default there's a 100MHz overclock to the GPU memory. You can also set cooler boost to max the fans out, or use the advanced option to customize the fans. Starting with the 5070 model first, the internal temps are cool when just sitting there idle. The rest of the results are from combined CPU and GPU stress tests, which aim to represent a worst case full load scenario. The GPU does reach thermal throttling in extreme mode with the fans on auto, but Apex mode resolves that as it spins the fans faster. Manually maxing out the fans didn't change anything from there. There's no problem closing the lid if you want to dock the laptop, and putting a metal stand under it to help improve airflow barely helped. Even the cooling pad I test with, linked below, did nothing unless we crank up the fans. But as you'll hear soon, that's way too loud and not worth it. The 5070 runs near its full 115W power limit in extreme mode, and the processor runs at around 35 watts. And here are the clock speeds reached during the same test. Now for the higher spec 5080 version. Temperatures under load were quite similar to the 5070 version, actually cooler in a lot of cases, and no thermal throttling in any of the modes. The 5080 GPU only gets 10 watts more power compared to the 5070, and the CPU gets limited to 28 watts, down from the 35 watt watts we saw with the 5070 model. In other words, the power budget shifts more towards the GPU than the CPU when both are loaded up at the same time, which will probably be better for most gaming workloads with the 2560 by 1600 resolution screen. The CPU can use more power in a CPU-only workload like Cinebench, where the GPU is idle. But again, there's no real difference with Apex mode enabled as far as performance goes. It performs fairly similar to all of the other Intel 386H laptops that we've tested so far, though a little on the lower side. Still, decent performance for a laptop on the thinner side, though Lenovo's Legion 7i is thinner and performs better with more cores and threads. Performance lowers when we unplug the charger and run on battery power, which is normal, but the other laptops with the same processor are able to perform better. As for keyboard tabs, most laptops I test are in the low 30 degrees Celsius range at idle, and the 5080 is a little warmer, but still felt relatively cool when doing nothing. The Stealth gets warmer with the stress test running, and again, the 5080 model was a little warmer in the lowest silent mode, but not hot to the touch. Balanced mode is fairly similar between the two. The middle feels a bit warm, but the rest and WASD areas are nice and cool. It's a similar deal in extreme mode. The hottest point where you touch is around the spacebar and top of the touchpad, so while gaming, it feels fairly comfortable. It doesn't really change much with MSI's new Apex mode enabled, and we can see the air exhausts below the screen at least don't appear to be blasting directly onto the panel, and setting the fans to max doesn't change too much, but there's a strange difference between them in fan noise. The hotspot of the 5070 laptop was cooler compared to the 5080 model, but that's because the 5070 model is running its fans faster and louder in the same mode. At the end of the day, both are using a similar amount of power across the CPU and GPU. 10 watts more for the GPU in the 5080 model, but about 7 watts more for the CPU in the 5070 model. Anyway, both are relatively cool under load, and cooler compared to the ASUS Zephyrus competition. But just how loud are the fans? Let's have a listen. Interestingly, the 5070 laptop in purple was a little louder, particularly in extreme mode with Apex enabled and the fan set to auto. If you recall, this was the only test where the 5070 laptop was thermal throttling on the GPU, so this may be why. The 5080 version in red, on the other hand, did run cooler despite the higher tier GPU, maybe because it's a bigger GPU die and that extra 10 watts of power isn't enough to make a difference. The 5080 was suspiciously quiet compared to all other laptops tested, even in its highest Apex mode, though as we saw earlier, its keyboard was warmer. But the 5070 Stealth's keyboard still wasn't too bad compared to most others. Here's how an actual game performs with the different performance modes in use on the 5070 model. The purple bars were tested with the screen's native resolution, while the red bars show DLSS upscaling on balanced to boost performance. Enabling Apex mode barely made a difference, but we can still get 60 FPS from silent mode with DLSS on and a much quieter laptop. As for the screen, the Stealth 16 has a 16-inch 2560 by 1600 240Hz OLED panel, which offers excellent colors and contrast. Brightness in SDR mode is fairly typical at around 400 nits, with brighter possible in HDR mode, while it can get very dim at minimum brightness, which would be good for using in the dark. Brightness is similar compared to many OLED panels from laptops last year, but the newer 2026 Zephyrus Zephyrus G16 and Legion 7i get around 100 nits brighter in SDR mode. That's a 25% increase in terms of nits, but our eyes don't perceive brightness linearly, so those brighter OLEDs only appear more like 8% brighter. The MSI Center software provides some OLED care options to help reduce the chance of long-term burn-in, but all options were off by default. Other negatives of OLED panels include PWM flickering, which can give some people a headache after long use, and the glossy screen will show more reflections in a bright environment. As always with OLED panels, screen response time is super fast, with it only taking about half a millisecond for content on screen to update. There's not really any practical difference between all of the OLED laptops we've tested. They're all fast and great for gaming on. Total system latency is the amount of time between a mouse click and when a gunshot fire appears on screen in Counter-Strike 2. The 5080 version was a little faster, which makes sense. Producing more frames lowers latency, and both laptops produce fast responses. No problems here. Just like other MSI laptops, the Stealth still does not have advanced Optimus or G-Sync, which I think is quite pathetic from a premium gaming model like this. And before you say it's not a gaming model, MSI's website disagrees with you. It does still have a mux switch, so you can use that to disable the integrated graphics and get a speed boost in games, but it requires a reboot. There is at least adaptive sync available from the integrated graphics when Optimus is on. There's a 1080p camera above the screen in the middle. It has IR for Windows Hello Face Unlock. This is how it sounds while typing on the keyboard. And there's also a built-in privacy shutter. But how well does the Stealth 16 perform in games? We've tested these settings on the 5070 and 5080 versions. In Cyberpunk 2077 at 1080p, the 5080 version gets beaten by ASUS's Zephyrus G16, which has a higher GPU power limit despite being a thinner laptop. The lower GPU power limit matters less for the lower spec 5070 version, with the Stealth not too different compared to others we've tested. At 1440p, the difference between the 5080 Stealth and Zephyrus is much smaller, despite the difference in GPU power limit. Meanwhile, the 5070 is still performing like a 5070. Though it's worth noting that just because this test doesn't have an issue with 8 gigs of VRAM, doesn't mean others don't. Take Marvel's Spider-Man 2 for example. This was not tested on the Stealth 16. It's an example from my upcoming 5070 8GB vs 5070 12GB comparison, and really shows why I think MSI should have used the 12GB 5070. Same GPU, but wildly different performance when 8GB of VRAM is the bottleneck. Back to Cyberpunk, at 4K the 5080 Stealth was only slightly behind the Zephyrus, and both are notably behind thicker, more powerful 5080 laptops. But at these frame rates, you definitely want to throw on some DLSS. There was much less of a difference between the 5080 Stealth and Zephyrus in Alan Wake 2. Even at the lower 1080p resolution, they're basically the same, while the 5070 version was a little behind compared to others tested with the same power limit. We're seeing pretty much the same thing at 1440p, so an impressive result for the 5080 version compared to the more powerful Zephyrus. But the same GPU in bigger laptops can reach 20% higher frame rates, and the Stealth actually had a slight edge over the Zephyrus at 4K in terms of 1% lows, which represent the dips in performance. It's a similar deal in Black Myth Wukong. At 1080p and 1440p, MSI's Stealth 16 with 5080 was very close to ASUS's Zephyrus G16, while the 5070 performs just like you'd expect a 5072. It's more of the same if we enable ray tracing and DLSS upscaling. I really wasn't expecting the Stealth to be so competitive with the Zephyrus due to the higher GPU power limit found in the Zephyrus. But that said, let's not forget the Stealth is a thicker and heavier laptop too. Here are the 3D Mark results. Content creator tests were only run on the 5070 model, and the Stealth was ahead of the 5070 Ti in the smaller G14. The OLED screen makes this a portable content creator laptop option. Just keep in mind it doesn't have an SD card slot while the Zephyrus series does. MSI's advanced BIOS provides you with almost unlimited customization once you enter the usual cheat code to access it. You can change things from power limits, temperature limits, memory speeds, and far more. Linux support was great. The only thing I couldn't get working out of the box was the fingerprint scanner. It just wasn't recognized by FPrintD. You can find the best price on MSI Stealth 16 with the link below the video. That takes you to our dedicated Stealth 16 page on the gaminglaptop.deals site, where you can see every configuration we're tracking. You can view price history across multiple retailers to see if now is actually a good time to buy, or if the price is still too high. Just set your price target and we'll email you when it drops so you don't miss a sale. At the time of recording in mid-August though, there aren't any amazing stealth deals. $2,500 for the 5060 model is kinda crazy, especially when the 5070 Ti is only $400 more after recently getting its first sale. And the RTX 5080 version we've looked at in this video goes for 4K. So far, its best discount was $200 less. So personally, I'd be waiting for a much better sale. But the Stealth looks like a steal compared to the current pricing of ASUS's Zephyrus G16. Overall, I'd say the G16 is the better laptop in most cases. But at these prices, I'd be looking at a last-gen 2025 model instead, as those are often priced far better. But is the Stealth 16 even worth considering? Let's summarize the good and the bad to find out. Starting with the good, the Stealth has upgradable RAM unlike some of its competitors. Gaming performance is similar to the more expensive Zephyrus G16. The Stealth has an insane amount of BIOS tuning available. It's got a nice looking OLED screen, though it's not quite as bright compared to some competitors this year. The Stealth has great battery life, good speakers, and it's got an Ethernet port if that's important to you. As for the bad, it's on the more expensive side, though to be fair, it's cheaper than ASUS's Zephyrus series. There's no SD card slot for creators like its competitors have, there's more screen wobble than I'd like, and at times I found the large touchpad annoying to use. Bottom line, I personally prefer the ASUS Zephyrus series over MSI's Stealth, but there's not really too much to hate about the Stealth. And it's hundreds of dollars cheaper too. I think the Stealth feels nicer than the Legion 7i in terms of build quality, and the Stealth is available with higher tier GPU options than the Legion as well. Granted, the Legion does at least use the 12GB version of the 5070, whereas MSI are using the 8GB version. So for the 5070 Ti or 5080 configs, I can recommend the Stealth if you're after a thinner laptop with more GPU power, as long as the price is right. Honestly, I still think the best move for a thinner and lighter laptop that still packs a punch is the last-gen 2025 Zephyrus G16. They've had some really good sales on our gaminglaptop.deals website lately, at least while stock still continues to remain. If you want to find out more about the Stealth's top competitors, check one of these videos out next. They're both some of my favorite gaming laptops this year.